Part 1. Before the transformation, the rain tapped gently against the windowpane, mirroring the dull rhythm of my life. It was January 2019, and the small town of Bend, Oregon, was cloaked in a soft gray mist that seemed to seep into my soul. At 34, I felt like I was stuck in a monotonous loop. Wake up, go to my uninspiring job as an administrative assistant, come home to my tiny one-bedroom apartment, and scroll mindlessly through social media until I fell asleep. Then, repeat. For years, I'd been going through the motions, but lately, the emptiness had become unbearable. Every day, I looked around and saw people thriving. My best friend, Megan, was running a yoga studio downtown. My sister, Caitlin, was happily married and working on her second book. And me? I felt like an extra in someone else's story, a nameless figure in the background who wasn't really living. It wasn't always this way. In my 20s, I was vibrant and full of dreams. I wanted to travel, create, and make a difference. I had imagined myself running a business or leading a creative project that I was passionate about. But somewhere along the way, I got stuck. A series of rejections from grad school, a breakup that shattered my confidence, and a lack of direction led me to take the first stable job I could find. 1 year turned into 5, then 10, and here I was, still at that same desk, typing up meeting minutes and scheduling appointments for people whose lives seemed infinitely more interesting than mine. The worst part was the gnawing feeling that I was wasting my potential. I knew there was something inside me, a spark, a gift, something unique, but I couldn't seem to access it. Every time I tried to think about what I really wanted, the voice in my head would chime in with doubts. You're too old to start over. What if you fail? You don't have anything special to offer. These thoughts were paralyzing. So instead of exploring new possibilities, I stayed in my comfort zone, even though it didn't feel comfortable at all. My days were bland, my weekends uninspired. The only things that brought me a flicker of joy were my Friday night baking experiments. Baking had been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. Growing up, my mom and I would spend hours in the kitchen, making everything from chocolate chip cookies to elaborate holiday cakes. There was something soothing about the process, the way ingredients transformed into something magical, the smell of warm vanilla filling the house, and the satisfaction of creating something with my hands. But as an adult, I rarely made time for it. It felt like an indulgence, not a priority. That winter, however, baking became my solace. On particularly rough days, I'd stop by the local grocery store on my way home from work and pick up ingredients for whatever recipe caught my eye. One Friday night, it was lemon bars. The next, a decadent flourless chocolate cake. I would lose myself in the process, carefully measuring, whisking, and tasting, until the worries of the day melted away. For a few precious hours, I felt like me again. Still, it was just a hobby, a way to cope with the restlessness that churned inside me. It never crossed my mind that it could be more than that. I didn't have the confidence to imagine such a thing. And besides, I was too busy wallowing in self-pity to take any real action. The turning point came on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon in February. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the fluorescent-lit office walls, when I overheard two of my coworkers talking about their weekend plans. One of them mentioned a pop-up market happening downtown. She was excited about a new bakery that had gained a cult following for its creative pastries. They've got these lavender honey scones that people are obsessed with, she said, scrolling through Instagram to show a photo of the bakery's beautifully styled treats. Something inside me stirred as I looked at the picture. The pastries were gorgeous, artfully arranged on rustic wooden boards with sprigs of fresh lavender for decoration. They seemed to radiate joy and creativity. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of inspiration. It wasn't just the pastries themselves that intrigued me, it was the idea that someone had turned their passion into something tangible and meaningful. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table eating leftovers, I couldn't stop thinking about that bakery. Who were the people behind it? How did they get started? Did they have doubts like mine, or did they just know what they were meant to do? The questions swirled in my mind, refusing to let me rest. Over the next few weeks, I found myself daydreaming about possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. What if I could turn my baking into something more than a hobby? What if there was a way to share my creations with others? But just as quickly as the ideas surfaced, the doubts would creep back in. You're not a professional baker. You've never run a business. What if no one likes what you make? I felt trapped in an endless cycle of excitement and fear. I wanted to take a leap, but I was terrified of falling. And so, weeks turned into months, and I stayed exactly where I was, stuck on the sidelines of my own life. By the time spring arrived, I had convinced myself that pursuing my passion was unrealistic. I should focus on being grateful for what I had, I told myself. A stable job. A roof over my head. Friends who cared about me. It was enough, wasn't it? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Every time I walked into my office building, every time I sat down to type up another mundane report, I felt like a part of me was dying. I didn't just want more, I needed more. The question was, how could I find the courage to go after it? Little did I know, the answer was closer than I realized. It was waiting for me in the most unexpected way, tucked inside a brown paper bag with a spool of twine and a handwritten tag. But that part of the story, the part where everything changes, was still a few weeks away. For now, I remained in the liminal space between longing and action, not yet aware that the life I craved was just within reach. Part 2, the turning point. The day it all changed began like any other, with the relentless beep of my alarm and the gray light of an Oregon morning filtering through the blinds. I shuffled to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down to check my emails. Another round of scheduling requests and meeting agendas filled my inbox, the monotony weighing heavy on my chest. But then, something unexpected happened. Megan, my best friend, sent me a text. You have to come to this pop-up market with me this weekend. Trust me, it's your kind of thing. Ordinarily, I would have brushed off the invitation. Social events weren't exactly my forte these days. But there was something about Megan's insistence that made me hesitate. I typed back, what kind of market? She replied almost instantly, local artisans, food vendors, and small businesses. And there's this baking stand I've been dying to check out. You'll love it. My heart did a little flip at the mention of baking. I could almost see the colorful pastries, smell the sweet aroma of fresh bread and cookies. A part of me wanted to say yes, to see for myself what this market had to offer. But the other part, the cautious, self-doubting part, hesitated. Would I just feel more out of place, surrounded by people who had figured out their passions? I'll think about it, I replied, but Megan wasn't having it. Nope, she texted back, I'm picking you up at 10 a.m. Saturday. Be ready. When Saturday morning arrived, I almost canceled. I told myself I was too tired, that it was raining, that I had things to do. But Megan's car pulled up outside my apartment before I could come up with an excuse. She honked twice, and I had no choice but to grab my jacket and go. The pop-up market was held in a renovated warehouse downtown, the kind of space that managed to be both industrial and charming. String lights hung from the ceiling, and the air buzzed with chatter and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Megan linked her arm through mine as we wandered through the rows of vendors, admiring handmade jewelry, artisanal candles, and local artwork. And then I saw it, the baking stand. It was impossible to miss. The table was covered in an array of colorful pastries, each one more beautiful than the last. There were delicate fruit tarts, rustic galettes, and cookies decorated with intricate floral designs. The woman behind the stand, a cheerful redhead in her late 40s, greeted us with a warm smile. Her name tag read, Sophie. Everything here is baked fresh this morning, Sophie said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. Feel free to sample anything you like. I reached for a lavender honey scone, the one I'd overheard my coworker raving about weeks ago. As I took a bite, the flavors exploded in my mouth, sweet, floral, with just the right amount of buttery richness. It was perfect. I turned to Sophie, unable to hide my amazement. "This is incredible." She beamed. "Thank you. Baking has always been my passion. Turning it into a business was the best decision I ever made." Her words struck a chord deep within me. As she talked about her journey, starting small, experimenting with recipes, facing her fears, I felt a spark ignite inside me. This was someone who had taken the leap, someone who had turned her love for baking into something real and impactful. Megan could see the look on my face. "Told you this was your kind of thing," she whispered, nudging me playfully. Sophie's story lingered with me long after we left her stand. It wasn't just the pastries that impressed me, it was her courage. She'd started from nothing and built something extraordinary. That night, I lay in bed unable to sleep, Sophie's words echoing in my mind. If she could do it, why couldn't I? The next morning, I made a decision. I pulled out my recipe book, the one my mom and I had filled over the years, and began flipping through the pages. I found an old favorite, cinnamon rolls. My hands moved almost automatically, measuring and mixing, kneading the dough until it was soft and elastic. As the rolls baked, filling my apartment with their sweet, spicy aroma, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a new chapter. Could this be the beginning of something extraordinary? As I carefully frosted the warm cinnamon rolls, the idea of sharing them with others took hold of me. It wasn't enough to just bake for myself anymore. I wanted people to experience the joy I felt every time I pulled something fresh out of the oven. But how could I start? The thought of putting myself out there was overwhelming. My insecurities whispered loudly in my mind, "You're not ready. You're not good enough. Who would even care about your cinnamon rolls?" But Sophie's words stayed with me. Turning it into a business was the best decision I ever made. I decided to start small. That afternoon, I packed up a few of the cinnamon rolls in a neat little box, tied with a piece of twine, and walked over to my neighbor Mrs. Langley's house. She was an elderly woman who always waved at me from her porch, and I thought she might appreciate a treat. When she opened the door, her face lit up at the sight of the box. "Oh, these look heavenly. Did you make these, dear?" she asked. I nodded shyly. "I thought you might enjoy them." She invited me inside, and we sat at her kitchen table as she tasted one. Her reaction was more than I could have hoped for. She closed her eyes and let out a small, delighted sigh. "These are incredible. You have a real talent, you know that?" Her words filled me with a strange, tentative confidence. If Mrs. Langley could enjoy my baking so much, maybe others could too. By the time I left her house, I'd made up my mind to take the next step. I was going to bring my baked goods to the office. Monday morning, I arrived at work with a tray of cinnamon rolls, placed them on the break room table, and sent out a quick email to my coworkers. "Good morning. I brought in some homemade cinnamon rolls for everyone to enjoy. They're in the break room, help yourself." I spent the next few hours feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement, waiting to see if anyone would say anything. By lunchtime, the tray was empty, and I'd received half a dozen emails from coworkers raving about the cinnamon rolls. One of them, Jen from marketing, stopped by my desk with a big smile. "Those were amazing," she said. "Have you ever thought about selling them? I bet they'd be a hit at the farmer's market." The idea startled me. A farmer's market? That felt like a huge leap. But Jen's comment planted a seed. Over the next few days, I started researching what it would take to rent a stall at the local market. The cost wasn't as high as I'd feared, but the logistics, permits, supplies, setting up a stand, felt daunting. That's when Megan stepped in. When I told her about my cinnamon rolls and Jen's suggestion, she practically jumped out of her chair. "This is it," she said. "You've been looking for something to spark joy in your life, and this is it. I'll help you set up your stall. I know the market organizers." We can make this happen." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and with her support, I took the plunge. I spent the next few weeks preparing for my first market day. I experimented with new recipes: blueberry scones, double chocolate chip cookies, and my mom's famous apple turnovers. I stayed up late researching food presentation, watching YouTube tutorials on how to make my stall look inviting. Megan even helped me design a simple sign, "Bakes by Emma." The night before the market, I was so nervous I could hardly sleep. What if no one bought anything? What if my pastries weren't good enough? But as I stood in my kitchen, packaging each item with care, I felt a sense of quiet determination. No matter what happened, I was proud of myself for trying. The next morning, I arrived at the market early to set up my stall. The air was crisp, and the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon. Megan was by my side, helping me arrange the pastries on rustic wooden trays. We added small handwritten labels for each item, and she tied sprigs of rosemary around a few packages for a touch of charm. By the time the market opened, I was ready, or as ready as I could be. The first hour was slow, with just a few curious passers-by stopping to look. But then a young couple approached, drawn by the smell of freshly baked cinnamon rolls. They bought too, and as they walked away, the woman took a bite and exclaimed loudly, "Oh my God, this is amazing." Her reaction caught the attention of others, and soon, my stall was bustling. People were drawn to the warm, comforting smell of the pastries and the care I'd put into their presentation. I smiled until my cheeks hurt, chatting with customers and hearing their kind words. By noon, I'd sold out of almost everything. As I packed up my stall that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a deep sense of purpose. I had done it. I had taken a chance, and it had paid off. And while there was still so much to learn and so many challenges ahead, I finally felt like I was on the right path. That day at the market wasn't just the beginning of a business, it was the beginning of a new life, one filled with creativity, connection, and the courage to follow my dreams. Part 3. After the transformation didn't happen overnight. It started with small, shaky steps that eventually built into something far bigger than I ever imagined. My first farmer's market stall was a mix of nerves and excitement, but it turned out to be the best decision I'd ever made. That morning, Megan helped me set up. My stall wasn't as elaborate as Sophie's, but it had a warmth and charm that I was proud of. Rustic wooden trays held cinnamon rolls, blueberry scones, and my mom's beloved apple turnovers. A simple sign read, "Bakes by Emma," handwritten in Megan's perfect calligraphy. Customers trickled in slowly at first, some curious, others hesitant. But then, a young couple stopped by, lured in by the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls. The woman took one bite and exclaimed, "This is amazing." Her reaction caught the attention of others, and soon my stall was bustling with people. I sold out within hours. The joy I felt that day was unlike anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't just about selling pastries, it was about sharing a part of myself with the world and seeing others find happiness in it. That moment marked the beginning of something incredible. Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly to grow my baking business. I experimented with new recipes, invested in better equipment, and even took a weekend course on food entrepreneurship. The farmer's market became my second home, and my regular customers turned into friends. Each week brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to learn and grow. One of my proudest moments came when a local cafe owner approached me about supplying their bakery case with my treats. I was hesitant at first, worried I couldn't keep up with the demand. But with Megan's encouragement, I took the leap. Seeing my pastries in their display case, alongside their sleek espresso machine and cozy seating, filled me with pride. Of course, there were setbacks too. A batch of overbaked cookies. A rainy market day where hardly anyone showed up. Days when I questioned if I was good enough or capable of making this dream sustainable. But every time doubt crept in, I thought back to that first market stall, to Sophie's words, and to the people who believed in me. By the time a year had passed, Bakes by Emma was no longer just a weekend stall. It had grown into a full-fledged small business. I rented a shared commercial kitchen, launched a website for online orders, and even started teaching baking classes on the side. My life was busier than ever, but it was full in the best possible way. Looking back now, I can't believe how much has changed. I'm no longer the woman who felt stuck in a monotonous loop, watching life pass her by. I'm someone who took a chance, faced her fears, and created something meaningful. And it all started with a spark of inspiration, a lavender honey scone, and the courage to take that first, uncertain step. To anyone reading this who feels like they're stuck or unsure of their path, I want to say, you're never too old, and it's never too late to start again. Your passion might be waiting for you in the most unexpected place, just like mine was. Take the leap, you might just surprise yourself. There was one moment I'll never forget. One Saturday morning at the market, a little girl with curly blonde hair tugged on her mom's sleeve and pointed to my cinnamon rolls. The mother smiled, bought one, and handed it to her daughter, who took a bite and lit up with delight. She looked at me with wide, sparkling eyes and said, "This is the best thing I've ever tasted." It hit me then that my baking wasn't just about selling goods, it was about creating small moments of joy in people's lives. And it reminded me why I'd started this journey in the first place. Every smile, every thank you, every story someone shared about enjoying my pastries with their family, it all added up to a sense of purpose I'd never imagined. And so I'll ask you again, what's the dream you've been waiting to chase? What's the one thing that lights a spark in you, even if it feels too small or too far away? I want to hear your story. Let's cheer each other on, because we all have the potential to create something extraordinary.